was addressed to someone else, not a different name, my address, but the account number inside didn't match anything I'd ever opened. I stood at the kitchen counter, coffee going cold beside me, reading it a second time. A third time. A savings account at a credit union 2 towns over, with my social security number attached to it, holding $14,000 I had never deposited. I called my sister-in-law. She picked up on the first ring, which she never does. "Oh, that," she said, and I heard something behind her voice. Not guilt, exactly, but the practiced calm of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. We were going to explain everything this weekend. We, my brother and her. Always we, even when it was her idea. "Explain what?" I asked. "The account is just temporary, for safekeeping. You've always been so disorganized with money, and after what happened last year with your car loan." I hung up. I sat down on the floor. Not dramatically. My legs just stopped working for a second. "My name is Macie Duran. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed occupational therapist with a patient caseload I actually care about, a lease I've never missed a payment on, and apparently a secret bank account someone else opened in my name without my knowledge or consent. That last part is called identity fraud. I know that now. I didn't know it yet when I was sitting on my kitchen floor staring at the letter, but I would figure it out very quickly. Here's what I also didn't know. This wasn't the beginning. This was just the first time they'd gotten sloppy. The beginning, if I'm being honest with myself, was about 8 months earlier. After my mom passed, she died in February, a Tuesday, very quietly, the way she'd done most things. Pancreatic cancer. We had 5 months from diagnosis to the end, which sounds like enough time but isn't. My brother flew in from Phoenix for the last 2 weeks. He brought his wife. They were very helpful, in the way people are helpful when they're also paying attention to what's in the house. My mom had a small estate, the house she'd lived in for 27 years, a life insurance policy, and a savings account she'd never touched since my dad died in 2019. The will was simple. Everything split evenly between my brother and me, with me listed as executor because I was local and he was not. The house was worth about $310,000. The savings account had about $68,000 in it. The insurance paid out $50,000, split 2 ways. It wasn't generational wealth, but it was something. Something my mom had carefully protected for 30 years so that her kids would have a foundation. My brother and his wife started helping about 2 weeks after the funeral. It started with reasonable things. He offered to manage the estate paperwork since I was so overwhelmed with work. She offered to call the insurance company since she had experience with that kind of thing. I let them. I was exhausted. I was grieving. I was seeing 12 patients a day and coming home to an empty apartment and crying in the shower every night, and the idea of someone taking something off my plate felt like oxygen. What I didn't register not then was how specific their questions were. Where exactly was the account held? Was my name the only one listed on the deed? Had Mom ever talked about changing the beneficiary and the insurance? Did I have a financial advisor? Did I have a will of my own? My sister-in-law asked these questions the way she asks everything, warm, casual, chin resting on her hand, like she's just curious, like she cares so much about my life and wants to understand it better. She has this gift for making surveillance feel like intimacy. I thought she was being supportive. I thought my brother was being responsible. I thought we were finally, after years of living in different cities and seeing each other twice a year, becoming a real family. I was wrong about all 3 things. The first sign I actually noticed, and chose to ignore, came in April. I went to meet with the estate attorney to sign some transfer documents, and he mentioned, almost as an aside, that someone had already called to ask about the timeline for releasing funds. "Your brother," he said, checking his notes. "A few times, actually." I smiled and said something vague, but driving home I felt something shift. My brother had a good job. He wasn't hurting. There was no reason for him to be calling the attorney multiple times unless he was tracking the money with a focus that went beyond brotherly concern. I told myself I was being paranoid. We'd grown up together. He taught me how to ride a bike. He'd called me every year on our mom's birthday since we were adults. These things mattered, but I started paying closer attention. The second sign came in May. I went to refinance my car, nothing major, just trying to lower the interest rate, and the lender flagged an inquiry on my credit report from a bank I didn't recognize. I called the bank. They said an account had been opened in my name 3 months earlier. I thought it was a mistake. Some kind of data breach. I filed a report with the credit bureau and moved on. I know. I can hear how it sounds now. The third sign came when my sister-in-law texted me a link to a financial advisor she wanted to recommend. The advisor specialized in estate management. She said she'd already talked to him about my situation. She said he was expecting my call. Something about that last sentence made my stomach drop. She described my situation to a stranger. My finances, my inheritance, my account balances, information I'd share with her in what I thought were private conversations between family, and she'd handed it to someone I'd never met, someone who was now apparently waiting for me like I was a scheduled appointment. I didn't call him. Instead, I called my college roommate who is a forensic accountant in Boston. Her name is not relevant. What is relevant is that she's the kind of person who sees patterns before other people see problems. I described everything, the estate questions, the credit inquiry, the financial advisor, and she was quiet for a long moment. Macie, she said, who has access to your personal documents? I thought about it. My mom's house. I'd left a folder there during the estate process. Tax returns, my social, old bank statements. Easier than going back and forth. My brother and his wife had a key. They'd been in and out for weeks. Another silence. You need to pull your credit reports from all three bureaus tonight, she said, and then you need to call a lawyer before you call anyone else. I almost didn't listen. Part of me still wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, that the account was a misunderstanding, that my brother had good intentions and just hadn't thought things through, that my sister-in-law, for all her nosiness, loved me in some fundamentally real way. But I pulled the reports that night. There were two accounts, not one. A savings account and a secondary checking account, both opened within 6 weeks of my mom's death, both with my social security number, neither of which I had ever authorized. The total sitting in those accounts just over $22,000. I sat at my desk for a long time. I looked at the framed photo on my bookshelf. My mom, my brother and me at the beach, maybe 15 years ago. He's laughing with his head back. I'm squinting at the sun. She's in the middle holding both our hands. I thought about calling him. I thought about giving him a chance to explain. I thought about how easy it would be to pick up the phone and say, "Talk to me, tell me there's something I'm missing." Instead, I opened a new browser tab and typed, "How to document financial identity fraud committed by family member." That was when I stopped being a grieving daughter and started being someone with a plan. I spent the next 3 weeks doing things that felt, in the moment, deeply unnatural. I am not a confrontational person by nature. I chose occupational therapy because I wanted to help people rebuild. I am not built for strategy, but grief does something interesting to your priorities. It clears away all the softness you normally hide behind and shows you exactly what you're actually made of. I met with an attorney, not the estate attorney, a different one, specializing in elder financial abuse and civil fraud. She had reading glasses she never actually wore, just held. She listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she set the glasses down on the desk and said, "They opened 2 accounts. Are there any others you know of?" "Those are the only ones on my credit report," I said. "Let's check the estate accounts," she said. We did. There was a discrepancy in the life insurance distribution. The check had been cashed, both halves, but the portion that should have come to me, $25,000, had been deposited into one of the fraudulent accounts before being moved somewhere else. My sister-in-law, it turned out, had called the insurance company posing as me. She'd submitted a change of direct deposit information. She'd routed my money to an account she controlled. She had done this 43 days after my mom died. My attorney looked at me over her glasses, still not wearing them, just holding them again, and said, "Do you want to proceed?" I looked at my hands. I thought about my mom who had saved and scrimped for 30 years, who had driven a car with a broken AC for 4 summers because she didn't want to touch the savings account, who used to say, "I want you kids to have something to stand on." "Yes," I said. The next 6 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went to Sunday dinners at my brother's house, which they'd started hosting, and I ate the food my sister-in-law made and listened to her talk about a kitchen renovation they were planning, and I smiled and asked questions and never once let on that I knew. She has a particular way of talking about money when she thinks she's being subtle. She'll reference a vacation she's planning, or a new car she's thinking about, or some project around the house, and there's always this slight pause before she says it, like she's savoring something. I noticed it differently now. The pauses had a rhythm. They'd started about 2 months after my mom died. My brother was different. He got quieter the longer this went on. He'd look at me across the dinner table sometimes and open his mouth like he was about to say something, and then his wife would touch his arm and he'd close it again. I used to think he was just tired. I understand now that he knew. He knew, and he couldn't quite make himself stop it. And he couldn't quite make himself confess, and so he just went quiet and let his wife steer. That is its own kind of betrayal. Maybe a worse one, actually. About 4 weeks in, I made a controlled mistake on purpose. I mentioned casually at dinner that I was thinking about liquidating my mom's investment account. There wasn't one, and putting the money in a high-yield savings account at a new bank I was looking at. I gave my sister-in-law just enough detail to act on, the name of a real bank, a realistic dollar amount. Within a week, there was an inquiry on my credit report from that bank. Someone had tried to open another account. My attorney filed with the county DA's office the following Monday. Fraud, identity theft, unauthorized use of financial information, misrepresentation to an insurance company. The filing was detailed. It was also, my attorney said, unusually well documented for a family case. That was because I'd been quietly building it for 6 weeks. I had bank records, credit inquiries, the insurance company's call logs, a statement from their fraud department, and a recording, entirely legal in my state, one-party consent, of a phone call in which my sister-in-law had described the account she was managing for me in enough detail to be completely unambiguous. She hadn't even been careful. That was the thing that struck me most in the end. She hadn't been careful because she hadn't thought I would look. She'd assessed me as someone too overwhelmed, too trusting, too disorganized with money, and she had built her entire plan on that assessment being correct. It was not correct. The morning that detectives came to their house, I was at work. I was in the middle of a session with a patient, an elderly man relearning how to button a shirt after a stroke, and my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I ignored it because I was working. My attorney left a voicemail. My brother left 3 texts, escalating in tone from confused to frightened to something that just said, "Macie, please call me." I finished the session. I helped my patient work the last button. He looked up at me when he got it and smiled the way people smile when they'd done something they weren't sure they could do anymore. I told him he did great. I meant it. Then I sat in the break room and listened to my attorney's voicemail. Charges filed, arrests made, both of them. The accounts had been frozen. The funds, all of them, were being flagged for recovery. She said it calmly, like it was a routine update. For her, maybe it was. For me, sitting under the fluorescent lights with my cold coffee, it was something else. Not triumph exactly. Not relief. Something quieter and heavier than either of those things. I called my brother back that night. He answered from what I assume was a borrowed phone. His had been confiscated. Macie. His voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Scraped clean of something. "I know," I said. "I wasn't sure what I meant by that. I just needed to say it. I didn't." He stopped. "It was her idea, but I didn't stop it. I could have stopped it. I didn't say anything." "I'm sorry," he said. "That's real. I'm not saying it to. I know," I said again. "Are you going to—" "I'm going forward with everything," I said. "I'm not doing this because I hate you. I'm doing it because Mom worked for 30 years to leave us something, and what you let her do with it was wrong." He didn't answer for a long time. "I know," he finally said. "We haven't spoken since. The civil case took longer than the criminal referral. 4 months, 3 hearings, more paperwork than I had ever held in my hands in my life. My sister-in-law hired a good attorney who tried to argue that she'd been acting in my best interests, that I'd been demonstrably struggling, that the accounts were meant to protect my money from my own mismanagement. She said this with a straight face. Her attorney said it with a straighter one. My attorney dropped the documentation on the table in the same way, I imagine, that people have been dropping things on courtroom tables since there were courtroom tables. The judge reviewed everything: the forged deposit authorizations, the insurance company records, the recorded phone call, the credit inquiries from the fake application, the timeline laid out in clear sequential order, starting 43 days after my mother's funeral. He looked up and asked if I was seeking full restitution. "Yes," I said. "Everything." My sister-in-law was crying by then. My brother stared at the table. Their attorney was doing the thing attorneys do when they've run out of good arguments, which is to straighten papers they've already straightened. The judgment came down 3 weeks later. Full restitution, every dollar. A fraud finding on both their records. A restraining order, which I hadn't expected but accepted without argument. My sister-in-law is currently facing criminal charges that are still working through the system. My brother took a plea that involves restitution payments and probation. I got my mom's money back, every cent she'd saved, every dollar she protected. On the day the wire transfer cleared into my actual account, one I opened myself, in person, with my own ID and my own signature. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and let myself cry for the first time since all of this started. Not because I was sad, exactly, because I was tired. Because I had spent 8 months holding something very heavy and very still, and I could finally put it down. I thought about my mom. I thought about her driving that car with the broken AC. I thought about her voice on the phone every Sunday, always asking how my patients were doing, always more interested in other people's recoveries than her own comfort. She knew what it meant to build something slowly. She knew what it meant to hold on to something even when it was hard. She didn't raise me to be easily moved. They thought grief made me soft. They thought loss made me careless. They thought the version of me crying in the shower every night was the only version of me there was. They didn't look closely enough.